We are here with Krissa Watry. Woo, exciting today. Hey, and
kind of a
man, my
half-hearted woo.
co-host, John Yarian.
Do you want to run that back?
Oh, I'm going to build it up. Here we go. So the thing about Krissa is she's an Air Force Academy graduate, MIT graduate, a rocket scientist, and she's inventing the Internet of Toys. She plays with toys, and it's fascinating. Your career is one that anybody would aspire to, and it's one we can dive in at any point in time. But I got to know, where was this seed planted? Could you see as a child that I'm going to be a rocket scientist?
No, I never wanted to be a rocket scientist. I think it was just a few lucky events that got me there. But it still was never my passion. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to own a business. I wanted to reinvent everyday objects. I wanted to redesign things and put them into consumers' hands. And, that was just part of my journey, I guess.
Well, wait, what are these lucky? So luck had something to do with it, which I think is maybe a dubious claim, but we'll explore it. What are these lucky things that led to where you are today? What's the happenstance?
Well, I think the luck was I knew exactly what I wanted to do at about age 12. I knew I wanted to be a mechanical engineer.
Really?
My dad owned an auto body shop, and he was a mechanic, right? And he told me they don't make any money. So I said, well, mechanical engineers, that's where I'm going. Then I watched this public broadcasting special, and they were fighting robots back in, you imagine that in the 90s or 80s, whatever it was, early 90s. And it was MIT. And I asked my dad, Dad, that looks cool. I want to do that. And he's like, well, that's at MIT. You have to be really good to do that. And I was like, well, if it's the best, then I want to go to MIT. So I want to be a mechanical engineer. I want to go to MIT. And then in high school, I got to go to Zeba Designs, which was a product design firm in Portland, Oregon. And they had the beginnings of the Starbucks reverse brew coffee pot. And they were just inventing it. And it was like a Folgers can, actually, and some surgical tubing. And it's now the basis of the Clover brew system that they have. And I saw it come to market and was like, product design, right? That's super cool. And it's now on the market, selling to consumers. All right, I want to be a mechanical engineer. I want to go to MIT, and I want to be a product designer. And along that way, I didn't have the funding to, family means to be able to go to MIT straight out. And the Air Force Academy afforded me that opportunity. So luckily enough, I was, graduated top in my mechanical engineering class.
There is so little luck. There's no luck here.
I got a free education to be a mechanical engineer.
This is the furthest thing from free. Don't call it free. Yeah. That's not free. That was such an incredible, David Copperfield story. There's
I was
no luck there.
lucky enough that I didn't have a college.
So for the purposes of this pod, we're defining luck as working incredibly hard, I guess.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so let's talk about the military for a moment. Sometimes, some people might think of it as process-oriented, somewhat rigid, possibly bureaucratic sometimes. Yep. Whereas entrepreneurship, you think of the archetype of the entrepreneur as being agile, pivoting, innovative. Maybe those are both cliches. What in your mind did they inform each other in a really meaningful way, or are they fairly disparate?
Outsiders might look at the military as rigid, and it is disciplined, right? You have to have discipline. You are pretty much owned, and your time dictated, and your events. But how you go about those, and how you lead from below effectively, how you lead your troops from above is actually, I think, something that helps you as an entrepreneur, because then as you're working to grow this idea and try to get people in on your idea and, influence the capital holders to give you funding to sponsor your idea. I think there's a lot that the military helped prepare me for as an entrepreneur. Plus just the pure grind and then the grit, that I think the military definitely instills is very important for entrepreneurship.
Well, in my experience, people have such limited contact with functional organizational structures. They really don't know how to put teams together and how to create hierarchy and accountability. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me to be in conversation with somebody like you who's had an experience of that in maybe one of its most refined and considered states, the U.S. military structure, who could come out of that and say, okay, if 4 of us have to do something, let's create a little order to it. Like, let's separate and organize ourselves. Was that influential, or am I projecting that on you?
It's probably just innate in most military folks. We go through a lot of leadership and teamwork activities, and then just being part of trying to accomplish a mission. So I think it's more about how do you rally your troops? In this case, it's my employees. How do I rally them, the team, and try to go accomplish our mission? I think as an entrepreneur, it's harder. Like, what is that mission, right? Like today, the mission is, let's just get this app out, but long-term strategic mission, right? Getting clients on, getting our brands activated. But then how do we go about that? There's no right answer. In the military, there might be a right answer, right? There might be that operations plan that exists. I think entrepreneurship, you have to be much more creative, which is why not all probably military folks would want to be an entrepreneur, even though they have probably the basis to become one. But you have to be super creative on how you're going to get to that endpoint before your financial runway runs out, because that's ultimately your oxygen.
Well, let's talk about the strategic mission for a second. What is your current product in development, and how is it going to reach the marketplace?
Got it. I'll give you a little bit of background that maybe catches some of the community up. So we started in building a smart toy under National Science Foundation that inspired the next generation in STEM careers. In doing that, we unveiled that the real problem in this industry is that the privacy laws, so the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, was really limiting how toy companies were bringing their products to market. There was no one out there that was effectively meeting these regulations with a platform solution that would easily activate toys or connected devices. So as everything comes online for the connected world, this thing called the Internet of Things, no one had a platform that just easily activated the under 13 market. So we actually pivoted from toys and started working on building the entire platform that safely activates kids' connection into the digital world. So that is called iOKids is our app. The whole platform, though, is what we then activate brands with. So we like to think of it as the electric grid, right, for the kids' connected world. We're building that electric grid so that everyone can turn the light bulbs on.
Can you maybe offer a concrete example of what you just described in use of a brand, leveraging it, and then how that would be seen or perceived by the end user, the kid? Give me that in like
I'll give you a pretty good example. So like Fitbit, right? So kids are probably wearing Fitbits, but if you actually go dive into their privacy policy, Fitbits are not for the under 13 market. They are not for kids, is what they specifically say. The reason is because of that privacy regulation. So what we do is we can go to a Fitbit and say, Fitbit, you can now activate your under 13 market, and you can create a safe, family-connected, friend-connected environment. So iOKids is where the parent goes and logs in. They verify their identity. They create their kids' accounts. Kids can now go log into our iOKids app. They add their friends, they create their friends lists, and they can interact with the brands inside of our app. But what they can also do then is on the Fitbit app, just like you might see a Google sign-in or a Facebook Connect, you're going to start seeing iOKids sign-ins. That iOKids sign-in is where the kids come in. Through that social sign-on, it goes and looks if the parents approve that device per the laws. If they did, right, so the parent just gets this notification, and they say, yep, I approve everything that Fitbit's going to collect, store, and share on my child for them to use this Fitbit. They provide that consent, and now Fitbit has the proper legal consent to allow that kid to use their platform. So it's all enabled through us. And then the cool part is our platform feeds the friends list, feeds the parent permissions through, so that a parent has one location where they manage a child's friends list and what the apps, toys, and devices they're using in the connected world. Because if Fitbit created their own, if Transformers had their own, and My Little Pony had their own, ultimately a parent would be going crazy with parent dashboards and
Yeah.
devices wouldn't be used.
We're talking about universal identity management, where it's in my hands instead of on the brand side, where there's an individuated login and I can create self-reported preferences and things like that.
You got it.
I got it. It took me a minute, but I caught up.
Yes.
And parents want to do this because it enriches the experience of a product or creates access to a product for their kid. That would be their motivation.
That is correct. And what's happened is the kids industry right now is suffered age compression because the toys don't have these preferences. So if you're 7, you've pretty much jumped into the adult world. The top app, for kids is Snapchat. And yet a brand who's trying to reach kids can't go use Snapchat or even Facebook to activate their product. That would be very illegal.
There's a different kind of age compression in your 40s, John, let me tell you. So I have a 10 and a 12-year-old. Are we getting to the point, too, where biometrics will play into this and that, that with all the cyber attacks, there'll be increased degrees of ways that I can protect them online?
Absolutely. So our goal is that we create this framework and then we can start, since we're focused on it, right? Like a toy company or a Fitbit wouldn't be focused on what that security protocol would be. We can focus on the security, we can focus on the privacy compliance, we can work with all the latest and greatest technology to make sure that the kids have the safe connection in. But ultimately, right, technology was in my hands at a very young age and provided me the ability to succeed. And I believe kids need that same access to technology, and you can't take it away from them because it is their future. So we have to figure out how to put it safely into their hands, give them the digital training wheels, make parents feel comfortable with it, like they're kind of in control, and let the kids go off and explore.
So for you, this is democratization of access. There's almost a moral obligation here to let kids experience and be a part of something that is inevitably going to come their way very soon. So it might as well be optimized and personalized and accessible by them at an earlier age.
You don't want your kid just to activate on like Instagram, Snapchat, or at school with technology where they have a lot of access and not know what to do, not feel like you've properly trained them, right? So what we hope to accomplish with iOKids is that they have this period of time where they're under kind of the parents' purview, and ultimately the parents like, oh, you got this thing, right? So when they are, 13, which is the legal limit here in the U.S., to go off into the digital world, they're off and running. But meanwhile, the brands also have a safe connection to kids that's parent-gated.
Let's pivot for a second back to the fuel you mentioned earlier, the venture capital, the fundraising side. So in yesterday's paper, I believe in the Wall Street Journal, it was reported that a very small percentage of funding went to women-founded companies last year. I believe it was only around 2% in the year 2017.
I believe it.
Yeah, which is ridiculous. And, several years ago at Dig South, we had our very first pitch event 4 years ago, and you won. You were the only female to enter the contest, and you slayed all of the men, and it was fantastic. And I know since then you've connected with Christina Montague at Jump Fund, who runs a fund that only invests in female entrepreneurs. I thought maybe you could touch on your perspective raising money on funds that are created specifically for women and your thoughts on that.
Raising capital is probably my full-time job, just to keep us moving towards our goals, right? It's so critical. And it has been very challenging. I would say that probably I've been blessed to have gotten a decent amount of capital compared to other companies here in the Southeast. But I do think that it probably is a hindrance, especially actually developing a kids platform and being a female, because they just automatically put me in this category that, oh, she must have had a kid and decided to go make some kids platform. And actually, I don't even have kids. Like, right? Like, I'm here to safely connect kids to technology. And
you're a mechanical engineer. You're a tech entrepreneur.
Absolutely.
Right.
I'm a cool aunt too.
Right. There should be a bias.
Nobody wants a parent-created platform. That's pretty lame. No, seriously, right? Because I have to balance requirements. It has to be still fun for kids, and yet so you got to balance everybody's requirements.
Well, how do we change those perceptions? So I have a daughter, and I want her to go out there and kick ass and raise some funds. How do we do that?
I think you got to show more people doing it, more women leaders, more women in tech, to get more other women inspired to be in tech. I was actually thinking about this today. I was like, I probably have only hired a couple women engineers in my entire life. And I've hired a lot of people. That's sad. That's really sad. And the thing is I don't even see it changing all that much. I had a little bit of a glimpse of, I talked to the entrepreneurship class at College of Charleston last week, and there's just a ton of females in there. That was super cool. But on the engineering and the tech side, like it's lacking. And I actually think it's getting worse. I know there's a big
pipeline
push.
problem.
Yeah, I think it's a pipeline problem. I know there's a big push in computer science, which is great. I think that may be a little bit more approachable. I'm actually more worried on the engineering side for myself. Like as a mechanical engineer, it's like nil on the women's side. And I believe it starts at a super, super young age that you have to convert them. And technology is gender neutral. So technology should be able to excite everyone, but you got to get them when they're super young. Otherwise, you can't overcome the barriers of gender norming that happen in our society. And people just do it. They don't realize they're doing it. And, I'm, pretty vocal, and I probably don't fit the mold. So I definitely bring it up, but most people don't even know, when they comment to other young girls or, oh, you shouldn't do that, honey, but to the boys, they can jump off the tables and, swing from the, chandeliers and, oh, they're just being boys, right? It's those things that happen at a very young age that, to me, then do impact it, right? Let your girls play in the mud, because then when they're out there fixing things, and, I get my hands dirty all the time. I get my hands dirty more than my husband does. I fix the cars in my family. He does the dishes. Like, it's a totally different arrangement, because that's what I'm good at. And that's, he flies planes. He doesn't like to get his hands dirty. So I think, we need to encourage people to have those skill sets. And that's how we then change more women then being in the pipeline, and then more women being in front of them that have the proper skills. Because at the end of the day, I still haven't hired that many females. Why? Because I hire the best. I want the absolute best. And sure, I could probably, I'm always looking and to hire more, but they're just not out there. Like, I always ask myself that, like, why aren't there more? Why haven't I found them? Or why aren't they applying? That's definitely a good.
Well, it sounds like, going back to the beginning of your kind of entrepreneur and your story earlier, and I'm reading between the lines a little bit here, but it sounds like you had an exposure to a mechanical environment that you obviously weren't shunned from or limited in your access to. You clearly could see it enough to be interested in it. You weren't kicked out of the room.
Right.
And two, when you had an exposure to an academic environment, something that was competitive and rigorous but resulted in something fun, that was represented to you as hard but not impossible or wrong for you, or that you shouldn't plan towards. Is that correct, or did you come up in a way that was a little bit more...
That's generally correct. I'd correct one point in that, saying it wasn't wrong. I just like to be a rebel. So when people told me I shouldn't wear baseball caps, because this wasn't, girls don't wear baseball caps, I said, well, but I like to wear them.
So what you're saying is this is oppositional defiance disorder, and I've misperceived it as your progressive mindset.
Right.
And
But
really
I shouldn't
set an
have
issue.
to. I have these debates with my friends all the time. I shouldn't have to have been different and I shouldn't have had to push the norms. It should be accepted. And I think our society has come some ways, like I just heard the Boy Scouts are letting girls in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think these kind of things are going to help provide other skill sets that help. But that's not to say, right, like, we shouldn't gender norm, or we shouldn't even say that if because you like to do these certain things, then you're either good or bad at tech, or you should be a computer scientist or not a computer scientist. I think we need to encourage all skill sets to get into these careers. But I know it is a barrier if you're sitting at the table with 80% men. I mean, I went to a school, Air Force Academy, 16% women. Then think about mechanical engineering. There was like 2 other girls in all of our mechanical engineering classes.
Well, and I think it's almost, a double jeopardy. I mean, it also seems like when I'm around starters and founders and women who've created like you have, there's this broad expectation that now they have this advocacy responsibility. Now they need to not only raise funds and raise their business, but now they're somehow supposed to speak on behalf of, represent, and elevate this entire community, which is probably impossible, at a minimum, really tough to do. It's really hard to just raise the money and run your business.
It's a heavy lift.
Not in it, right. So that, I think that's also problematic, because we tend to pick people out and then just decide, oh, well, now it's up to you to speak for this or speak to this or make your own life more difficult.
I probably speak through my actions.
Yeah.
And I try to let those be my words. But I don't mind, like, I get called to speak a lot, and I'll, share my story. Yeah. And it resonates quite well. It's always, you pick the ones out that are like, oh, I was trying to think about what I want to do, and, here's some ideas, and, helping folks kind of, provide clarity to kind of the ideas that they have. Other women that are aspiring in the field, looking to be entrepreneurs, like, that's always exciting to me. I don't know, like, I'm happy to carry that as that advocacy point, because I think that's why I'm an entrepreneur, actually, is to inspire the next generation of innovators. And to me, that there is no gender there. Mm-hmm. It's just technology based.
So let's take it back to place for a second. Let's pivot there. So you've lived in Boston, you've lived in Seattle, correct? Yep. You've had some exposure to SpaceX and fantastic companies, but here you are in Charleston, South Carolina. Yes. So what does that sense of place mean to you, and what does it feel like to be the scrappy underdog here?
What does it feel like? I don't feel like an underdog here. I mean, not anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the community here has been so accepting, and, like, it took a little bit, but the entrepreneurship side is growing, going through the Harbor Accelerator, right? Getting linked up. I mean, Dig South, when we won that, was like an instant in the community. It was like, oh, you won that. I remember that. I still get stopped and been like, I saw you on stage. I'm like, oh, that was a long time ago, but thank you. So I think compared to the big places, is we've been able to kind of stand out, right? And that's actually one thing I always recommend when women say, oh, don't you feel disadvantaged? And I'm like, no, I don't feel disadvantaged being a woman in tech right now, because I stand out. And, if you do now that could be a bad thing if you're not all that polished, but it also can be a really great thing if you have a solid idea and your act together. You really stand out. And so leverage that as an opportunity, because everyone's going to know who you are when you do get your time to shine. And I feel like Charleston has really allowed me to have that opportunity to shine, to innovate here on our idea to launch iOKids, provided us the support from the angel community. Now starting to get the venture capital stuff built in here in Charleston, getting them in on our work, and then working now as we push out of the Southeast to help us get networked outside the Southeast.
And originally you're from where? West Coast?
Yeah, from Oregon, Portland,
okay.
Oregon.
Yeah. Personally, what's the experience for you? I mean, you've been in Charleston for a while. Mm-hmm. Love it? Weird, strange, culture shock over all that? I mean, what's that feel like for you?
I'll take you back a little bit. So my husband said, hey, we're going to get stationed in Charleston, South Carolina. And I said, I want to open a business when I go to the next spot. And I don't think I can do that in Charleston, South Carolina. I might have dropped a few other words. And he's like, all right, well, just come out. I got a trip out there. He was training the Emiratis how to fly C-17. He's like, I got a trip out there. Come out and just check it out. We went down. We kind of fell in love with it. Like, we were down in Folly. It just seemed so warm and accepting. The community. I was like, dang, all right, I can see myself here. So I basically said, I'm in, but I have to have a spot on the beach, right? Like, so lucky enough, we found a house on Folly, and that was kind of, we've been here for over 5 years now. We've really made it home. My husband actually got out of active duty so we could stay put here and really grow the business. We really feel networked, and it's been great.
That's a big, Portland to Charleston is that's a pretty big difference. culturally and
remember I was
dialectically.
military,
Oh, yeah,
so I
there's a lot
jumped
in
all
between.
over Colorado,
Yeah.
Boston, Florida, Oklahoma.
But when you stay on the edges, what I think is interesting about that is I wonder how much of your experience here feels really, really southern versus Charleston, which is pretty, it's pretty different in terms of the state itself and the surrounding region. You get exposed to a lot of people here who are in from other places and here for other reasons. So I don't know if in your own mind you even really feel like you live in the Deep South versus living on the coast, on the edge of the world, on Folly.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's the South because you can feel the sentiment. I mean, I think people are just different here. Like, they're open and warm. I mean, people will sit there and chat at you in the parking lot, and it's like, sir, I don't even know you, but it's great chatting for the last 30 minutes, right? Like, it's just that community. And I think then the folks that move here, which is most of us, start to see that, and it wears off on us and really creates this really cool ecosystem where people are open to help, their fellow neighbor. And I think that the entrepreneurship community obviously is reflecting of that.
What's the road ahead? What's the next 3-4 years as this thing grows, as people appreciate it, get into it?
Well, we hope to be powering basically most of the big toy fitness side under 13 connected experiences. So we got our sight set on major growth, exponential growth as we get this off the ground. We have our iOS app on the App Store right now. That's called iOKids. The Android complement comes out in a month. And then our API, where the brands all start to activate, is also out in November. And our first experiences are launching in November as well. So we got a big kickoff at Elfstravaganza with Wonderworks. We're doing an interactive retail experience through her stores this holiday season. We got actually another local guy. He's got Coach Horn. He's got a really cool basketball app on the Apple Watch. That's going to be all connected into the platform, making a safe community for basketball, youth basketball here in Charleston for his leagues, but then also growing out nationally. So we got a lot of really cool stuff, plus big brands, none that I can announce yet, but really cool brands.
Tell us about the team for a minute. What is required to pull all of this off? Where do they come from? How did you find them?
So I have a phenomenal team. I mean, we couldn't build a secure, privacy compliant platform without great developers. So my developers are actually and more than my developers, my entire team really makes up our success.
What's the breakdown? How many people?
So I have currently 5 full-time developers, backgrounds in like making ultra secure APIs for the military, right? No fail APIs, front end, back end, Android, iOS. We're doing some React Native stuff. And then I have in-house general counsel that's her experience is from the White House. And she is our privacy cyber GC. So as obviously we deal with a lot of privacy compliance. And so that's really important. So we got some high-powered people. On our advisory team, we got folks that were like in charge of marketing the Super Soaker, right? Now they're our toy industry gurus, really providing our ins to the toy industry. And on our board, we got veteran toy inventors that have licensed 50 plus toys to the toy companies. So lots of toy professionals and they're all resident here in Charleston, right? Because these high-powered folks have moved into town because they know how awesome life is here. And then we've been able to recruit them to be part of our team, which is just phenomenal.
Does scaling mean you need 25 more developers and 3 other lawyers? And how far does that premise you just established go? Can you stay here? I mean,
I would like to stay here. I would like to stay here. I do think we need a bigger pipeline of talent to the Southeast. So whether we have to go help create that pipeline by having places elsewhere and showing them how awesome it is here, or obviously it would be great for the community to come in and help with that pipeline.
We were actually looking for an unqualified promise, a guarantee right now that you would stay here. So you're not going to get that. Is that?
Well, I think
you have to talk to the attorney about that.
Okay. All right.
So that house
counsel.
on Folly isn't going to be sold anytime soon. So we've pretty much agreed that we'll always have a presence here in Charleston.
The development team's all here? Is that distributed? Is that worldwide?
It's right now. It's all right here
Okay.
in-house.
So that's something presumably you could access globally. You could.
Yeah, except with the privacy and security concerns, we have to have really tight control
Oh,
of who has
yeah.
access and how it's
I
constructed.
bet you guys work in
and-
a box big time with a lock
we just
on
don't
it.
want. I just don't want to
True.
hire a ton of outside developers.
Yeah.
That we have to keep it tight. But that doesn't mean we can't have other locations doing different things. But I do see our core folks right now are here in Charleston. I would love to stay here, provided we can grow our business effectively.
Is there more the entrepreneurship community could do, together to help you increase that pipeline? I mean, there are many meetups, networking events, Dig South Tech Conference, of course, but what else could we do?
I think it's awareness for sure, like you're talking about. So Dig South is a good one for awareness of Charleston and what it has to offer, and I want to move there. I mean I hear that a lot, like I've been thinking about moving down there, or I was just visiting there. The goal is to get maybe those folks that are graduating from the top schools to consider Charleston. And how do we do that? How do we have our fingers in that pipeline? Creating some internships or maybe some sponsored internships to pull them down here and feed them into and see how awesome it is, so that it can kind of blossom from there. And then also, I think College Charleston, Clemson, those have done a lot to try to grow their computer science, specifically talking to that side. I just think we need to do more. I think they need to double down, triple down, quadruple down for this to be the capital, right? Or build the Silicon Harbor that they're looking for.
A lot for anybody listening. There were a lot of air quotes just then. Chris said Silicon Harbor.
I know. Well, I hate the term, to be honest.
Yeah.
I want to build Charleston.
I just wanted to make sure everybody knew you weren't like really sincerely doing that. I thought I would clarify that. It was very ironic.
Yeah.
Sure. Has the DoD presence here with Booz Allen and Spay War, has that been helpful to you, or is it?
I believe, and I come from military side, right? So, and I manage DoD contracts. There's an innovativeness that is required of the personnel that I want on my startup. And typically when they're used to working for a government contract, as a systems engineer at Spay, they're not used to working in the environment where I actually expect them to do work. Not that they don't do work, it's just that they're doing systems engineering, like requirements. And like when you really need, no, I really need you to write the code. I really need you to design the architecture. That's just an innovativeness that sometimes. Oh, and by the way, I'm not gonna pay you like medical benefits right now, and we really don't have a vacation plan. And
It's a different culture.
It's kind of risky. You need those people that are kind of like, oh, I just want to go change the world doing something really cool. And I realize that there's not that. But I'm now bought into this mission. I'm going to get some stock options that hopefully, get multiplied exponentially in value. So it's a different mentality. I don't think it's bad for the area. Don't get me wrong. I'm from that world, so I don't want this to be mean at all. It's just, it is a mentality switch, and I haven't seen that many can make that mentality switches. They're just comfortable in their life. It's a low risk life. They're really well paid for what they do, and it's hard to then switch over to the entrepreneur side.
All right, we'll get you out of here on this one. Real quick, paint us a picture. Give us the low point and then the high point of your entrepreneurship journey. What moment did it feel the worst, and when did it feel the best? How did you know?
The low point was when we determined we had to pivot, or I determined it, right? Like that we had to pivot. That the way to see my vision forward was to pivot into a software platform. We were building toys. I'm a mechanical engineer. Like that's kind of my thing. But I knew my ultimate vision couldn't be seen until we did that. The high point was when we pivoted. Because it opened the door towards actually achieving the bigger vision.
That's cheating. Come on.
It is.
Come on.
No, it's totally. It totally.
Did that feel like failure at first, though? I mean, if you were really wedded to this one vision of it, did that?
Yeah, and then I had to go tell all my investors who invested in a toy
we
that
screwed it up. We don't know.
I just spent a couple $100,000, and by the way, just
NBD.
Yeah,
we're not doing it that way.
Yeah, we're not.
Yeah.
We learned what the real problem was by doing that, right? Like, so it wasn't wasted funds. It was just that we had to go through that to figure out what the market really needed. And then maybe the good part was the 6 months later when we came up with the mock-ups for what we thought the platform could be. We took them to a top 3 toy company. We were sitting there and the developers were like, does this API exist already? Like, if it did, I'd be already using this. So does it exist? And that's when I knew, like, oh my gosh, yes, we're totally in.
Yeah.
We got to go build this thing.
I love
So
it.
love the market, hate the market. You know, every entrepreneur, some dreamers want the market to accept them, and others just accept it and adapt.
Right. And I think, this market is still evolving, so it's a little bit hard to say, right, like the market's in completely, right? So we're trying to develop for maybe the market now, but also preparing for the future of it. But we think we're on to the right path, and we're really excited for everything to come out the next few months.
Well, terrific. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krissa.
Thank you for listening to Southpod, Rise of a Region, where innovators dish on success, failure, and a rapidly evolving South.